Hello and welcome back, bienvenidos critical thinkers. Today's TEK is G4B. Identify and determine the validity of converse, inverse, and contrapositive of a conditional statement, and recognize the connection between a biconditional statement and a true conditional statement with a true converse. This video deals with writing the converse, inverse, and contrapositives of if-then statements. Our learning objective is to write the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive of if-then statements. And you will know you have mastered this objective when I can give you, or anybody can give you, a conditional statement, and then you can immediately turn it into a converse, an inverse, and a contrapositive. Every skill that you're going to learn in this video is going to help make you a stronger thinker and a better problem solver. I know you can do this, so let's turn your practice time into your superpower. We have something called related conditionals, and these are other statements that are based on a given conditional statement. Now, you're used to seeing that given conditional statement. It's if something happens, then this happens, okay? But we can take that and we can convert that conditional statement, the one given to us initially, into three other types of conditional statements. So we can do a converse, an inverse, and a contrapositive. Now, I need for you to repeat them in this order: conditional, converse, inverse, contrapositive. Okay? Conditional, converse, inverse, contrapositive. Conditional, converse, inverse, contrapositive. I want you to pause the video for just a few moments. I want you to look at these four words, and I need for you to commit them to memory. Converse, inverse, contrapositive, and it all begins with a conditional. In order, they are conditional, converse, inverse, and contrapositive. Now, you know that when we write the symbolic statement for a conditional, it is if P, then Q. So if we want to take and create the converse, what we do is we flip the hypothesis and the conclusion. So Q moves down here to the hypothesis, and P moves over here to the conclusion. So for inverse, what we do is we take the initial conditional statement, the one that's given to us, and we negate the hypothesis and we negate the conclusion. The contrapositive is flipping that inverse statement. So this becomes our hypothesis, and this becomes our conclusion. So take a look at how to create these different statements. Again, the conditional is given to us, and what we do is we flip the hypothesis and the conclusion to make a converse. We negate the hypothesis and the conclusion to create an inverse, and we flip the inverse to make the contrapositive. Over here, you'll just see a verbal statement as to how to create them. An important concept is this aspect of logically equivalent, and that means that statements have the same truth values, okay? So I know that conditional statements and contrapositives are logically equivalent. So if the conditional is true, the contrapositive is true. Also, the converse and the inverse are logically equivalent. So if the converse is true, then the inverse is true. Or if the inverse is true, the converse has to be true. It also works with false. So if the conditional is false, the contrapositive is false. If the converse is false, the inverse is false. Now let's work on a problem together. The directions read, write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive. Determine if the conditional is true or false. And if the statement is false, find a counterexample. Okay? And so Here's the statement. A hamster is a rodent. Then notice it's not an if-then form. So what I have to do is I have to take this and I have to convert it to an if-then statement. So what I did was I said, if an animal is a hamster, then it is a rodent. So an animal is a hamster would be my P. It is a rodent is my Q. So this is my hypothesis. This is my conclusion. So if an animal is a hamster, then it's a rodent. Okay, and that's a true statement because hamsters do belong to the rodent family. So what I want to do is I want to convert this to a converse. So this is my converse right here. The way I do that is I flip the hypothesis and the conclusion. So I come over here and I say, I'm going to take my rodent piece, make that my hypothesis, take my hamster piece, and make it my conclusion. So if we were doing this symbolically, this would be if P, then Q, and then this would be if Q, then P for the converse. So it reads, if an animal is a rodent, right here, if an animal's a rodent, then it's a hamster. So this is false because not all rodents are hamsters. Like you have rodents that are guinea pigs, you have other types of rodents as well. And so just because it's a rodent doesn't mean that it is going to be a hamster. So that makes this statement false. So a rat is a rodent, guinea pig is a rodent, but a rat is not a hamster. So this is false. And this is my counterexample, the rat piece right here. So I'm giving you a counterexample proving that this statement is false. So now let's move on to our third, which is our inverse. So our inverse is right here. Now, in order to create the inverse, what we do is we take our hypothesis and conclusion, and we negate the hypothesis and we negate the conclusion. So we turn it into not P, then not Q. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hypothesis that's up here and I'm going to put a not in the right by the verb. So it's going to read, if an animal is not a hamster, then it is not a rodent. Okay? So we need to judge the truth value of this. So looking at the statement, if an animal is not a hamster, so we could have an animal that's a rat. So if an animal's a rat, it is a rodent. But this statement right here says if an animal's not a hamster, then it's not a rodent. But a rat is a rodent. Or a guinea pig. We could use a guinea pig this time. So a guinea pig is not a hamster, but it's still a rodent. So that turns this statement false, and the guinea pig would be my counterexample. Now, our last conversion is to a contrapositive. And the way we make a contrapositive is we're going to take that initial conditional statement, if P then Q, and we're going to negate the conclusion, and then we're going to negate the hypothesis. So the contrapositive is made by not Q, then not P. So it's basically taking the inverse and flipping it. So if an animal is not a rodent, then the animal is not a hamster. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this and determine the truth value of the statement of if an animal is not a rodent, then it is not a hamster. So let's think through this. If an animal's not a rodent, then it cannot be a hamster because a hamster is part of the rodent family. So this becomes a true statement. Making the conditional statement true, converse is false, inverse is false, and contrapositive is true. Now notice the conditional and the contrapositive are equal to each other. They're both true. Notice the converse and the inverse are equal to each other and they are false. Now it's your turn to take the lead. Let's see how you can apply what we've just learned in regard to related conditional statements and take a conditional statement that's given and turn it into the converse, inverse, and contrapositive. The instructions read, write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive, determine if the conditional is true or false, and if the statement is false, please find a counterexample. So let me just talk you through this for a little bit. So you want to locate the if and the then, all right? And anything after the word if becomes your hypothesis. And we'll call that our P. And anything that's after the word then becomes our conclusion. And that's going to be our Q. So remember, if we have if P, then Q, our converse is going to be if Q, then P. Our inverse is going to be if not P, then not Q. And our contrapositive is going to be if not Q, then not P. And then you have to look at it and determine what the truth value is of that conditional statement. Now remember, if it's false, what they want you to do is they want you to provide a counterexample. Please write down all your answers, and if you have any issues or questions, please ask for help. Now, you may check your answers on the next slide. So please pause the video and complete your work, and when you're finished, press play to continue. Here's the answer to our problem. Notice that I wrote down the conditional, the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive. So the statements written out are right next to them, and I tried to be color specific, okay? But then right underneath the name of the conditional statement, what I did was I put the truth value, okay? And notice that none of them were false. So we didn't have to come up with a counterexample, which was really nice. It makes it go quick. But please pause the video, check your answers, and when you're finished, press play to continue. This is it for today's video. We did some good work today. If something doesn't make sense, that is your cue to ask questions. In fact, it's your responsibility to ask questions. Now, you can come talk to me, you can ask your classmates, you can ask your shoulder partner, or even try AI for step-by-step explanations. Please remember that we're a team here, and we're all here to help one another succeed. You learn best by breaking complex concepts down into smaller, more manageable skills. And that's exactly what we did today in this video. You are turning your practice time into your superpower. Now, I believe in you, and I know that you can do this. You are working your way to success, learning one skill at a time. I want you to have an awesome day, and thanks for working with me.